The crayons fell out of Riley's backpack and scattered across the white floor like a rainbow explosion. The 9-year-old dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick them up before anyone noticed. This was exactly the kind of thing her mom had warned her about. Don't touch anything. Don't wander off. Don't embarrass the human delegation. Too late for that last one. Riley stuffed the crayons back in her bag and looked around nervously. The observation deck was empty except for the massive windows showing countless stars. Her mom was stuck in another boring meeting with the dragon people. The Draconids, they were called. Riley had seen them walking through the station earlier with their shimmering scales and wings folded against their backs. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. That a small chirping sound made Riley freeze in the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a decorative plant, except the tiniest dragon Riley had ever seen. Well, the only dragon she had ever seen up close. It was about the size of a large dog, with silver blue scales that looked dim and sad. The little creature was making soft, distressed noises, like a puppy that had lost its mother. Riley knew she should probably leave. Find an adult. Tell someone. But the baby dragon looked so lonely. She took a slow step forward. The dragon's head snapped up, large golden eyes locking onto Riley. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Hey there," Riley whispered. "Are you okay?" The dragon tilted its head, clearly not understanding human words. It made another sad, chirping sound. Riley sat down on the floor, keeping some distance between them. She pulled out her sketch pad and favorite blue crayon. The dragon watched with curiosity as Riley began to draw simple shapes. A circle for a star, another star, and another. She was drawing the view from the window, making it simple and bright. The baby dragon crept closer, inch by inch. Its scales started to shimmer a bit more, the sadness fading to interest. Riley kept drawing, adding planets and moons and swirls of color. A tiny claw reached out and touched the edge of Riley's paper. Riley looked up and smiled. "Do you want to try?" She held out a red crayon. The dragon sniffed it carefully, then took it in its claw with surprising gentleness. It looked at the crayon, then at the paper, then back at Riley with an expression that clearly asked what to do next. Riley demonstrated by making a simple line on the paper. The dragon watched intently, then pressed its crayon against the paper and made a wobbly mark. The look of pure joy on its face made Riley giggle. They drew together in comfortable silence. Riley made simple pictures, while the baby dragon created enthusiastic scribbles. Every few minutes, the dragon would look at Riley's work and then try to copy what it saw. The scribbles slowly started to look more purposeful. The dragon was smart. Really smart. "Riley-chan, step away from the hatchling immediately." Riley jumped to the sharp command. 5 guards surrounded them, 3 human and 2 draconid. The 2 species had weapons pointed in every direction, though thankfully not at the children. The baby dragon let out a shriek and pressed against Riley's side. Riley could feel it trembling. "We were just drawing," Riley said, her voice shaking. "We weren't doing anything bad." More people rushed into the room. Riley's mom looked pale and scared. A large draconid female with deep purple scales pushed through the crowd. Her eyes locked on the baby dragon. "Pip," the female draconid called out in a voice like thunder and music combined. The baby dragon, Pip, chirped sadly but didn't move away from Riley. Riley's mom knelt down. "Honey, you can't just approach alien species without permission. That's the matriarch's daughter. Do you understand how dangerous this could have been?" But Pip was sad, Riley protested. She was all alone and making sad sounds. The matriarch, Shalandra, stepped forward slowly. She looked at the 2 children pressed together, at the scattered crayons and paper covered in drawings. Her expression was unreadable. "The human child speaks truth," Shalandra said in careful English. "My daughter was distressed. I was called away to negotiations, and she—" The matriarch's voice softened. "She has been lonely." Riley held up the paper with their combined artwork. "We made this together. Pip is really good at drawing. See? She made these red swirls, and I showed her how to make stars." Shalandra took the paper with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such large claws. She studied it for a long moment. When she looked up, Something had changed in her eyes. Hatchlings of my kind do not typically engage in creative pursuits until much older, she said quietly. How did you teach her this? I didn't really teach her, Riley said. I just showed her what I was doing, and she wanted to try too. We were having fun. Ambassador Okoye, the head of the human delegation, cleared her throat. Perhaps we should discuss this in a more formal setting. No, Shalendra said firmly. She looked at Pip, who was still clutching a crayon. My daughter has chosen to trust this human child. That is not a decision made lightly, even by hatchlings. She turned to Riley's mom. Would you permit your young one to continue this drawing activity with mine? Under supervision, of course. Riley's mom looked shocked. Ah, yes, if that's what both children want. Riley looked at Pip. Pip looked at Riley. The baby dragon chirped hopefully and held out a green crayon. Riley grinned and took it. Yeah, I'd like that. 3 paper plates covered in paint sat between Riley and Pip. Purple, orange, and yellow mixed together as they pressed their hands into the colors and then onto a large sheet of paper spread across the floor. Pip's claws made interesting star-shaped prints while Riley's fingers created different patterns entirely. 2 weeks had passed since their first meeting. The observation deck had become their special place, transformed into an art studio with supplies brought from both human and draconid sources. Today they were learning about handprints, or in Pip's case, claw prints. Pip chirped excitedly and pressed both front claws into the orange paint, then carefully placed them on the paper. She looked at Riley and made a questioning trill. That's so good, Riley encouraged. Look, you made a butterfly shape. The baby dragon's scales shimmered bright gold with happiness. She had started using colors to show her feelings after Riley explained it to her. Red when frustrated, blue when sad, gold when happy. The adults watching through the observation window were constantly taking notes about this development. Riley dipped her hand in yellow and added prints around Pip's orange ones. We can make a sun garden. See? Your butterflies can fly around my flowers. Pip studied the emerging design, then grabbed a brush with her tail and dipped it in purple. She had figured out how to use her tail as a third hand last week, something that amazed the draconid scholars. Apparently, most hatchlings didn't develop that coordination for another year. As Pip painted purple swirls connecting their handprints, Riley noticed her friend's scales flickering between colors. Gold, then blue, then something in between. What's wrong? Riley asked. Pip set down the brush and made a long, low sound. She pointed at the painting, then at herself, then at Riley. Her scales went fully blue. You're sad about the painting? But it's beautiful. Pip shook her head, a gesture she had learned from watching humans. She picked up a red crayon and drew 2 figures on the edge of the paper. One tall with wings, one small without them. Then she drew a line between them and made an X over it. That Riley's stomach dropped. You think we're going to be separated? The baby dragon's scales went darker blue. She had heard her mother talking with the other draconids. The treaty negotiations were almost complete. Soon everyone would leave the station and return to their home worlds. Pip didn't understand all the politics, but she understood that Riley might go away. Hey, now look at me, Riley said, gently touching Pip's claw. My mom says we're setting up something called an exchange program. It means kids from different species get to learn together. We might not be on the station, but we can still talk. There's video calls and messages and stuff. Pip tilted her head. She didn't know those human words. Riley pulled out her tablet and showed Pip pictures of her room back on Earth. This is where I live. And see, I can show you things even when I'm far away. You can show me your home too. Understanding dawned in Pip's golden eyes. She leaned forward and touched the tablet screen carefully, looking at the images of Riley's room, her school, her cat named Pepper. The scales shifted from blue to a cautious yellow-green. Hope mixed with uncertainty. I promise we'll stay friends, Riley said. Distance doesn't change that. Pip made a determined, chirping sound. She went to the corner where she had been hiding a folder full of papers. Riley had noticed, but respected her friend's privacy. Now Pip brought the folder over and opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of attempts at writing. Human letters, copied over and over again. Most were backwards or upside down or strangely shaped. But Pip had been practicing in secret trying to form words. You've been learning to write. Riley's voice came out as a squeak. Pip nodded. She pulled out a fresh piece of paper and gripped a pencil in her claw. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration as she slowly, carefully formed letters. Riley's eyes filled with tears. Friend. You wrote friend. Pip looked worried at the tears, her scales flashing to concerned orange. But Riley was smiling even as she cried. These are happy tears, Riley explained. You worked so hard on this. Friend. Yes. Always friends. The baby dragon's scales burst into brilliant gold and silver, swirling together in patterns that the watching Draconid adults recognized immediately. It was the pattern of deep joy, of bonds chosen rather than assigned. Shalandra's hand went to her heart as she watched through the window. Pip wasn't done. She pointed at the letters, then at her mouth, shaking her head. She couldn't speak yet. Wouldn't be able to for years in the normal course of development. But she had found another way to say what mattered most. Riley hugged her friend carefully, mindful of the scales and wings. You're so smart. The smartest dragon in the whole galaxy. Pip chirped and hugged back, wrapping her tail around Riley's waist. Then she pulled away and pointed at the painted handprints they had been making. She added her writing below the art. Da Freund for the spelling wasn't perfect. The letters wobbled, and some are backwards. But the meaning was crystal cleared in the observation room. Shalandra turned to Ambassador Okoye. Both had tears in their eyes. Our children have accomplished what we spent months failing to do, Shalandra said quietly. They have built a bridge. Ambassador Okoye nodded. Built it with crayons and paint and pure hearts. They watched as Riley and Pip returned to their painting, adding more handprints and clawprints, creating something beautiful together. The treaty being negotiated in conference rooms suddenly seemed less important than the friendship blooming on that paint-covered floor. That evening, new clauses were added to the treaty. Cultural exchange programs, joint educational facilities, art therapy initiatives, all inspired by a 9-year-old human and a 3-year-old dragon who refused to let species differences define their friendship. The clay felt cool and smooth between Riley's fingers as she rolled into a ball. Across the table, Pip was doing the same with her claws, though her ball kept turning into an egg shape. The baby dragon huffed in frustration, her scales flickering orange. It's okay to be different, Riley said, holding up both shapes. See? Yours is like an egg and mine is round. Both are good. They were trying something new today. The art supplies had expanded beyond crayons and paint to include modeling clay, special heat-resistant paper, and even some weird gel that changed color with temperature. Riley's mom had explained that scientists from both species were excited to see what the children could create together. Pip looked at her egg-shaped clay and then deliberately made it more egg-like. She placed it carefully on the table and then breathed the tiniest puff of flame over it. The clay hardened instantly, turning a beautiful glossy brown that Riley's eyes went wide. Whoa, can you teach me to do that? Pip's scales shifted to happy gold. She loved when Riley asked to learn Draconid things. Most humans seemed scared of the fire breathing, but not Riley. The baby dragon picked up another piece of clay and shaped it. Then she looked at Riley and made a teaching gesture they had developed, touching Riley's hand and then pointing at the clay. Okay, so I shape it first, Riley said, making a small clay flower. Then you use fire? Pip nodded. But instead of breathing fire on Riley's flower, she went to get the special temperature-changing paints. She couldn't make Riley breathe fire, but maybe they could use heat in a different way. The baby dragon carefully painted Riley's clay flower with the special gel. Then she breathed a gentle, controlled flame over it. The gel reacted to the heat, creating swirls of red, orange, and gold across the white clay. When it hardened, the flower looked like it was made of sunset. That's amazing. Riley turned the hardened flower around, watching the colors shift in the light. We can make stuff together using your fire and my shaping. For the next hour, they experimented. Riley shaped while Pip fired. They created a whole garden of heat-glazed flowers, each one unique. Then Riley had an idea. What if I paint something first, and then you use fire to make it permanent? Pip chirped agreement, bouncing on her feet with excitement. Riley drew a simple picture on the heat-resistant paper of two figures holding hands. One with wings, one without. She painted it with regular watercolors first. Then Pip very carefully breathed a controlled flame across the paper. The watercolors reacted to the heat, spreading and mixing in ways they never expected. The two figures became surrounded by a burst of color, like a firework of friendship. When the paper cooled, the image was permanently sealed, more beautiful than either of them had planned. "We invented something," Riley whispered. "A new type of art." Pip's scales shimmered with pride. She picked up a brush with her tail and wrote below the image in shaky letters. Pip and Riley art at a sound from the doorway made them both look up. A group of draconid hatchlings stood there with their parents, staring at Pip with wide eyes. These were other young dragons from the delegation, all slightly older than Pip. They had heard about what the matriarch's daughter was doing, but hadn't believed it. One of the hatchlings, slightly larger with green scales, stepped forward nervously. He chirped something in the draconid language. Pip responded, then looked at Riley. "Do they want to draw too?" Riley asked. Pip nodded enthusiastically. She went to the newcomers and started making welcoming gestures, just like Riley had done with her on that first day. Riley quickly got more paper and crayons. The new hatchlings approached cautiously, clearly unsure about this strange human activity. Their parents watched from the doorway, some skeptical, others curious. Pip showed the others how to hold crayons, how to make marks on paper. She demonstrated the fire art technique she had just learned. The young dragon was teaching now, passing on what Riley had taught her. Within minutes, the observation deck was full of dragon hatchlings making art. Some were better than others. A few got frustrated and gave up. But most kept trying, encouraged by Pip's chirps and Riley's praise. The green-scaled hatchling created a beautiful fire pattern on his paper. He showed it to his parent with such pride that the adult draconid's eyes went soft. The parent knelt down and really looked at what their child had made. Seeing them in a new way, an elderly draconid scholar entered the room, scales faded with age. She watched the children working, and her expression shifted from skepticism to wonder. "I had forgotten," she said quietly in accented English. "Our ancestors practiced flame writing, creating images with controlled fire. It was lost during the war centuries, replaced with military training." She looked at Pip and Riley. "These children have rediscovered what we abandoned." Shalandra joined the elder, watching her daughter teach others with patience and kindness. "The human child has given my Pip more than art skills. She has given her confidence and purpose." Ambassador Okoye stood beside them. "And Pip has taught Riley that friendship transcends all boundaries, that communication happens in many forms." They watched as Riley and Pip worked together to help a struggling hatchling make their first successful drawing. The little dragon's squeal of joy made everyone smile. "We should formalize this," the elderly scholar said. "Create an actual program. Art education for hatchlings, taught by humans and draconids together. Joint youth centers," Ambassador Okoye added, "where children of all species can learn and play." Shalanda nudit slovely. "War taught us to fight. Perhaps peace requires us to remember how to play." On the floor, surrounded by papers and paints and clay creations, Riley and Pip didn't hear the adults planning programs and initiatives. They were too busy teaching a timid yellow-scaled hatchling that there was no wrong way to create, only different ways. The baby dragon's first artwork might have started with crayons, but it was growing into something that would reshape how two species understood each other. Riley packed her backpack slowly, trying not to cry. Tomorrow was the big treaty ceremony, and then her family would return to Earth. She had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make it easier. Pip sat in the corner of the observation deck, working on her secret project. She had been drawing something privately for 3 days now, hiding the paper whenever anyone came close. Even Riley hadn't seen it, though her curiosity was eating her alive. "Are you almost done?" Riley asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We only have tonight left." Pip's scales flickered blue, then gold, then blue again. She was struggling with emotions too. The baby dragon looked at her hidden paper, then at Riley, then back at the paper. She made a decision. Carefully, Pip picked up the paper in her claws and brought it to Riley. Her whole body trembled as she held it out. Riley took the paper gently. What she saw made her breath catch. Pip had drawn two figures in the center. One was clearly Riley with brown skin and black hair in two puffs on either side of her head. The other was clearly Pip with silver blue scales and small wings. The figures were holding hands and claw, smiling at each other. But that wasn't what made Riley's eyes fill with tears. Between the two figures, written in careful, shaky letters, was a word. Some letters were backwards. One was upside down. But Riley could read it. "Friend," friend, Riley whispered. Her voice broke. "You wrote friend?" Pip's scales went bright gold. She chirped softly and pointed at the word, then at Riley, then at herself. The message was clear. This is what we are. This is what matters. Riley pulled Pip into a hug, not caring about the tears streaming down her face. "This is the best thing anyone has ever given me. Ever." The baby dragon wrapped her tail around Riley and made a happy humming sound. But she pulled back and pointed at the paper again. There was more. Around the edges of the drawing, Pip had attempted to write other words. Al was friend. No forget. Pip loves Riley. Always friend. No forget. Pip loves Riley. Every word was misspelled. Every letter was wobbly. But every sentiment was perfect. "How did you learn all these words?" Riley asked through her tears. Pip went to her corner and brought back a stack of papers. They were covered in practice letters, words copied over and over again. She had been using the tablet to look at human words, trying to understand how they worked. The baby dragon had taught herself to write in a language that wasn't her own, using a skill that shouldn't develop for years, all to tell Riley something important, all to say goodbye in a way that would last. The door opened, and both their mothers entered. Shalandra and Riley's mom stopped when they saw the girls crying and hugging. "What's wrong?" Riley's mom asked, rushing over. "Nothing's wrong," Riley said, holding up the drawing. "Everything's right. Look what Pip made." Shalandra took the paper with shaking hands. Her scales rippled through colors Riley had never seen before. The matriarch stared at her daughter's writing, at the word friend in the center. "This is her first word," Shalandra said, her voice thick with emotion. "In our culture, a hatchling's first word shapes their path, defines who they will become." She looked at Pip with such love and pride. "My daughter chose friend, chose it in another species' language. This is unprecedented." Riley's mom knelt down and looked at the drawing. "Sweetie, do you know what this means?" "What Pip has done." "She told me we're friends," Riley said simply. "That we'll always be friends." "It's more than that," Shalandra explained gently. "When a draconid hatchling chooses their first word, they are choosing their companion, their chosen family. Pip has declared you as hers, Riley. You are bonded in a way that our people consider sacred." Riley looked at Pip. "Really? I'm your family." Pip nodded firmly, her scales blazing gold and silver. She chirped and pointed at the words again. "Always friend. No forget." Riley's mom wiped her own eyes. "I need to make some calls." If Pip has chosen Riley as family, there are legal implications. Visitation rights, cultural exchange provisions. "And I must inform the council," Shalandra added. "This changes the nature of tomorrow's ceremony. It is no longer just a political treaty. It is the recognition of a bond between our peoples, proven through our children." As the mothers left to make urgent communications, Riley and Pip sat together looking at the drawing. The baby dragon pulled out more papers and showed Riley all her practice words. Pages and pages of attempts to write friend, Riley, always, love. "You worked so hard," Riley said softly, "just to talk to me." Pip chirped and picked up a crayon. She wrote slowly on a new paper. "Riley worth it. Riley worth it." Riley hugged her friend again, and this time she wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying because she had never felt so loved, so understood, so seen. A baby dragon from another world had learned to write just to make sure Riley knew their friendship mattered. Outside, word was spreading through the station. The matriarch's daughter had spoken her first word, had chosen her companion. The treaty ceremony tomorrow would now include a recognition of this bond, a celebration of what these two children represented, But in the observation deck, Riley and Pip didn't care about ceremonies or politics. They sat together, adding to Pip's drawing, surrounding the two figures and the word friend with stars and flowers and swirls of color. Tomorrow they would stand in front of the galaxy. Tonight, they were just two friends making art and making promises that distance could never break. The Grand Hall was filled with beings from 30 different species, crystalline entities that chimed when they moved, insectoid diplomats with compound eyes, massive beings that had to attend via hologram because they wouldn't fit through the doors. All of them had come to witness the historic treaty between humans and draconids. Riley stood backstage wearing her nicest dress, holding Pip's claw. The baby dragon wore a ceremonial sash that marked her as the matriarch's daughter. Both children were terrified. "What if I trip?" Riley whispered. Pip chirped nervously and pointed at herself, flapping her wings slightly. "What if I accidentally fly?" They looked at each other and started giggling despite their fear. Around them, other human and draconid children waited with the friendship mural they had all created together. It showed dozens of hands and claws in every color, overlapping and connecting. 5 minutes, a coordinator announced. Riley peeked through the curtain at the massive audience. Important people in fancy clothes filled every seat. Cameras floated everywhere, recording for broadcast across the galaxy. Her stomach did a flip. Pip nudged Riley and showed her the special drawing, carefully protected in a clear folder. "Friend, their word, their promise." "You're right," Riley said, taking a deep breath. "We can do this together." The ceremony began with long speeches. The Draconid High Council representative spoke about cooperation and mutual benefit. The human ambassador talked about building bridges across the stars. Riley tried to pay attention, but the words were big and boring. Finally, it was time for the treaty signing. Shalandra and Ambassador Okoye approached the podium together, using special pens to mark their agreement on a document that would be stored in the Galactic archives. Then came the cultural exchange portion. The coordinator waved at the children. Riley and Pip led the group of young humans and draconids onto the stage, carefully carrying the friendship mural between them. The other children followed, some nervous, some excited. They positioned the large artwork on a display stand. Riley stepped up to the microphone, which adjusted automatically to her height. Her voice shook as she spoke. "We made this to show that being different is good. Every handprint and claw print is unique, but together they make something beautiful." The audience clapped politely. Riley could tell they thought it was cute, but not particularly important. Just children's art for a political event. Then Pip stepped forward. She carefully took the special drawing from its folder. The baby dragon held it up high enough for the cameras to capture, showing everyone the two figures and the word written between them. The Draconid translator, who had been providing interpretation throughout the ceremony, suddenly stopped. Her scales went pale as she read what Pip had written. "The hatchling has written her first word," the translator announced, her voice filled with awe. "In the human language, she has written friend." A murmur rippled through the audience. Those who understood Draconid culture sat up straighter. This was significant. Shalandra approached the microphone, scales shimmering with emotion. "In our tradition, a hatchling's first word defines their path. My daughter chose this word, chose to write it rather than speak it, finding a way to communicate before her voice was ready." She paused. She chose to honor her bond with the human child Riley Chun, declaring her as chosen family. Riley's mom stood up in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Riley waved at her and smiled. Ambassador Okoye stepped forward. "And from the human perspective, we understand that friendship requires effort." Pip taught herself to write in our language, practicing for days to tell Riley something important. This represents the dedication our peoples must show to understanding each other. The insectoid ambassador requested translation assistance, its compound eyes shifting between colors. When the explanation was provided, it made a sound like wind chimes. Query: the small ones accomplished what the large ones could not. "Yes," Shalendra said simply. "They built a bridge with crayons and patience and love. While we argued over territory and resources, they discovered what truly matters: A being made of living crystal approached the stage, its surface reflecting rainbow light. May we see the other artwork? The practice writings. Pip nodded eagerly. She brought out her folder of practice papers, showing page after page of attempted letters and words. The audience leaned forward, seeing the determination and effort in every wobbly line. Riley added, Pip couldn't talk yet, but she wanted to tell me we'd always be friends. So she found another way. That's what friends do. They try. The crystal being's surface shimmered. This is profound. Communication through determination. Bond through effort. You have created art, yes, but more importantly, you have created understanding. Other species representatives began asking questions. How did the teaching method work? Could this approach help other species learn to communicate? Would the children be willing to demonstrate their techniques? What started as a simple art presentation had become the most important part of the ceremony. The treaty signing was legal and necessary, but what Riley and Pip showed was something deeper. They proved that connection was possible, that trying mattered, that differences could become strengths. The elderly Draconid scholar from before stepped onto the stage. I propose we establish the Treaty Arts Center here on this station, a place where young beings of all species can learn together, teach each other, and build bonds like these children have shown us. The approval was unanimous. The ceremony concluded and delegates moved to the reception area. Riley and Pip were surrounded by beings wanting to meet them. The children pressed close together, overwhelmed by the attention that a small human girl, maybe 6 years old, pushed through the crowd. Can you teach me to draw with dragonfire? A tiny draconid hatchling followed. Can human teach me color feelings? Riley and Pip looked at each other and grinned. This was just the beginning. Shalandra found Riley's mother in the crowd. Our daughters will need to see each other regularly. The bond they have formed requires nurturing. I was hoping you'd say that, Riley's mom replied. I've already requested a transfer to the new cultural exchange program. We'll be stationed here for the next 3 years. Pip's scales exploded into brilliant gold when Shalandra told her the news. Riley squealed and hugged her friend so tight that Pip squeaked. 6 months later, Riley stood in front of a wall that didn't exist yet. Well, it existed, but it was blank, completely white and waiting for something special. The new Treaty Arts Center had been built on the station, and today was opening day. Children from a dozen species had already enrolled, but the main wall in the central studio needed its first artwork, and everyone had agreed that Riley and Pip should be the ones to create it. Are you ready? Riley asked, looking at her friend. Pip was bigger now, her wings stronger and her scales more vibrant. She could speak a few words in both Draconid and human languages, though she still preferred writing when she wanted to say something important. Her first spoken word, just 2 weeks ago, had been Riley. The baby dragon nodded and picked up a large brush with her tail. She had gotten very good at using her tail for detailed work. They weren't alone. A small crowd of children gathered behind them. 3 human kids, for Draconid hatchlings, 2 of the insectoid species larvae, 1 young crystalline being who communicated through light patterns, and even a blob-like child from a species that experienced art through texture rather than sight. Everyone ready? Riley called out. A chorus of agreements in multiple languages answered her. Riley and Pip had planned this carefully. They would start in the center, and every child would add their own mark, their own style, their own vision. No 2 species saw art the same way, and that was the whole point. Riley began with a simple outline in the middle of the wall. 2 figures, 1 human and 1 draconid, holding hands and claw. It was a bigger version of Pip's original drawing, the one that had changed everything. Pip used her fire breath on special heat-reactive paint, creating swirls of warm colors around the figures. The paint shifted from red to orange to gold. Like a sunrise point, one of the human children added flowers using stamps made from recycled materials. A draconid hatchling created flame patterns that looked like wings spreading across the wall. The insectoid larvae used their natural silk to add delicate threads that caught the light. The crystalline child projected colors that Riley and Pip traced, capturing light itself in paint form. The blob child couldn't see the colors, but they added textured elements that could be felt, making the mural accessible through touch. Riley hadn't even thought of that, but it was perfect. For 3 hours, they worked together. Sometimes they had to solve problems. The insectoid silk dissolved one type of paint, so they switched to another. The crystalline child's light was too bright at first, but they learned to dim it. The blob child accidentally smeared some work, but everyone agreed it looked better that way anyway. Adults watched from the doorway, including Shalandra, Riley's mom, and ambassadors from every species represented. They stayed quiet, letting the children work. When they finally stepped back, the mural was complete. The central figures of human and draconid were surrounded by an explosion of different artistic styles, all flowing together. Flowers and flames, silk and light, texture and color. Every species had contributed something unique, and somehow it all fit together perfectly. But they weren't done yet. Pip picked up a brush and carefully wrote words along the bottom of the mural. Her letters were much neater now, though still charmingly imperfect. Different together, Riley added more words beside Pip's. All friends, other children, each in their own way, added messages. Some wrote in their native languages. Some drew symbols. The crystalline child created light words that Riley photographed and painted over to make permanent. The blob child pressed their statement in textured dots that spelled out everyone welcome in a pattern that could be read by touch. When the last mark was made, the children stood together admiring their work. It wasn't just art. It was a promise, a statement, a vision of what the galaxy could be. Shalandra approached slowly, her eyes wet with tears. This is the most important artwork in the known galaxy. Not because of technical skill, but because of what it represents. Riley's mom nodded. Every treaty we sign, every law we pass, every agreement we make, it all comes back to this. To connection, to trying, to seeing each other as friends instead of foreigners. An elderly human diplomat, someone who had been skeptical of the whole art program, stepped forward. I owe you all an apology. I thought this was a waste of resources. I thought real diplomacy happened in conference rooms with adults. He looked at the mural, at the children who created it. I was wrong. This is real diplomacy. This is the future. The Treaty Arts Center officially opened that afternoon. Families from every species came to tour the facility, and everyone stopped at the mural. Some cried, some laughed, some just stood in silence, taking in. Riley and Pip sat in their favorite spot in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Pip was practicing writing longer sentences now, determined to write a whole letter to Riley someday, even though they saw each other every day. Do you think we really changed things? Riley asked, same question she had asked months ago. Pip set down her pencil and spoke carefully in human language. We showed way. Others choose walk it. Her grammar wasn't perfect, but Riley understood perfectly. They had shown it was possible. Now others had to choose to follow. Riley pulled out the original drawing, the one with friend written in shaky letters. It was framed now, hanging in her room, but she had brought it to show Pip. This is where it started, Riley said, with crayons and misspelled words and two kids who just wanted to be friends. Pip leaned against Riley's shoulder, a gesture of affection she had learned from humans. Her scales shimmered contentment blue-gold, the color she only showed around Riley. Below them, in the new art center, children of a dozen species were learning to draw together, paint together, create together. They were messy and loud and made mistakes, but they were building something that no treaty could ever accomplish alone. They were building friendship, one crayon at a time.